Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Audrey Stewart, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am so excited to welcome you to tonight's event with MUKOMA wa NGÜGÜ, presenting his new book, Unbury Our Dead with Song. Through good times and bad, Harvard Bookstore will continue to bring authors and their work to our virtual community. Our fall season is in full swing, and boy, do we have a lineup for you. Make sure to check out our event schedule at harvard.com/events, where you can also sign up for our email newsletter and browse our shelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question at any time during the talk, go to the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll get through as many as time allows. If you'd like to purchase a copy of Unbury Our Dead with Song, there will be a link in the chat where you can purchase. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so thank you. There will also be a link for donation in the chat if you would like to give additional support to Harvard Bookstore. Without your continued support and patronage, this virtual author series wouldn't be possible. Thank you so much for tuning in support of our authors, our incredible booksellers, and our landmark independent bookstore. We sincerely appreciate your support, especially now. And as you may have experienced in virtual gatherings, technical issues may arise. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as we can, so thank you in advance for your patience and understanding. Now, I am so excited to introduce tonight's speaker. MUKOMA wa NGÜGÜ is Associate Professor of English at Cornell University and author of The Rise of the African Novel, Politics of Language, Identity, and Ownership. He's written the novels Mrs. Shaw, Black Star Nairobi, and Nairobi Heat, and 2 books of poetry, Logotherapy and Hurling Words at Consciousness. He is the co-founder of Mabati Cornell Kishwali Prize for African Literature and co-director of the Global South Project, Cornell. Tonight, he is presenting his latest novel, Unbury Our Dead with Song. In the heart of Nairobi, 4 musicians, the diva, the Taliban man, the corporal, and the 70-year-old bartender Miriam, gather for a once-in-a-lifetime competition to see who can perform the best tizita. They are followed back to Ethiopia by a journalist hoping to uncover the secret of this haunting music. This is a love letter to beauty, music, and the imagination. Unbury Our Dead with Song captures how it feels to have an encounter with the sublime. And without further ado, I'll turn things over to our speaker. MUKOMA, thank you so much for being here. The virtual stage is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Harvard Bookstore for having me, for me to talk about this book. I think the release day, global release day, was just was it yesterday? Yeah, it was just yesterday. Yeah, so it's a pleasure. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read 2 passages and then talk a little bit about the book itself, and then and then hope for a good Q&A. The original format had been that would have a conversation with Peace, who is not here, that she couldn't make, logistical issues, if you want to call it that. Yeah, so I'm just going to read and then, and then talk about the book and then have a conversation. All right. So I'm going to read, the passage I'm going to read from is when the musicians, so you have four competing musicians who get together and to see who can sing the best tizita. And they are in a boxing club in Nairobi called the ABC. That's actually Ethiopian run. And yeah, so anyway, they're competing. So after this, I'll talk a little bit more about the tizita and its origins and so on and so forth. On stage, the musicians were enjoying themselves too much and they left us behind. And by the time we caught up, it was to find Miriam playing the accordion, looking so slight and bent forward that I worried about her. But she was at it, pulling, ebbing, and letting out a gentle church organ sound in song. The accordion lungs expanding and contracting gently, breathing in and out of layered prayers. She was swaying side to side, dipping in and out, lifting one foot in and out, wading out of the river of this tizita that as yet had no words. She stomped her feet, ran her right hand against her left on the accordion to create a confused, upside down rainbow of sound, and then a caesura. The silence transfixed the drunkards, gamblers, slummers, and the believers in place. The silence moved from being expectant to bordering on being painful. At the end of that silence, where the pain was turning into relief, the corporal with the Masenko came in and bowed a long, devilish, trembling bass, low and threatening. But the Taliban man was not going to have us threatened, and his guitar, with its clean, thin sound, note for note, came in. Miriam stomped her feet again, and silence reigned once again. And from that silence, she started singing, low, long moans gliding above and underneath the lazy accordion. The Taliban man's guitar was getting more urgent, while the diva on the piano was furious, and the corporal on his devilish Masenko held everything together. Then the corporal left his post and came in with a low buzzing sound of the Masenko, moaning that was amplified by the slow wail of the accordion as Miriam played it, pulled it apart. Her voice with a contained rasp came in once again. The Taliban man did a violent lead solo. The diva's piano jumped into the fray, playing peaceful but sharp, short, determined notes that threatened to undermine the Taliban man's work. They both went on like this for a while as we clapped and cheered and clapped to the beat. They played on, helping each other when one of them faltered with the beat and timing. A few minutes into the jam, Miriam looked at the Taliban man and he slowed down, his syncopated guitar playing, and the others followed suit. Silence, save for the low hum bars of the Masenko and the sound of the accordion slowly running out of air. She winked at me. This once, she said in English, and she bent her voice low and joined the Masenko. When I dream of happy days, oh Tizita, wake me so I can find you once again. I fear so much that you too will leave me, and I'll forget this pain that carries my love. And Tizita, if I forget those that I loved, how can I remember who I am? One day I'll be dead and gone, my grave untended, dead of birth and death, on my gravestone from centuries past, and only my Tizita will remain. Only you will remain. Tizita, what I fear the most is that I'll forget this pain that carries my love. So yeah, so then I'm going to read another passage that sort of explains hopefully what the Tizita is. You know, it's a long story about how I ended up writing the novel, right? So I had a Tizita back in the 2000s, you know, before we had CDs. No, okay, those days we had CDs, but before we could, you know, you could just, I don't know, Shazam a song, right? So I listened to a Tizita, and then at that point I didn't know what it was a Tizita, and I spent years looking for it. Just looking for this one song, you know, and any person I would meet, Ethiopian, I would ask, you know, do you know this song? Which of course I couldn't explain because I didn't know what it was. But there was something very transformative about the experience of being in this space and hearing this song. So this is then one of the characters then trying to explain to the journalist who is, the journalist who is telling the story in the novel. His name is Manfredi. So one of the characters is just trying to explain how or what the Tizita is, right? And what I found was that that eventually, if you push people enough about what the Tizita is, it breaks down, right? You know, so the standard understanding of the Tizita, it's memory, nostalgia, loss, and so on and so forth, right? But if you keep asking, at some point it becomes almost unknowable. So this is one of the characters trying to explain, right? And the character here is the corporal, who is, he was a former soldier. So he has his own traumas and so on and so forth. So, and then the journalist says, okay, in this particular passage, the journalist Manfredi is like, what do you mean the soul? Isn't that a bit vague? Okay, I asked. And then the corporal says, because it is unknown, we want to call it unknown because that is easy. Think about the first death. The tizita to me is that sound of the first death, the recognition and surprise and the realization, the first consciousness that realized it was going to be no more. And he wanted to leave a message in a bottle that becomes me and you. With the tizita, I can feel it, I know it, but I cannot speak it. So I sing the tizita because it will echo in your soul, sound waves from yesterday, meeting yours. Perhaps we shall understand something that we do not have words for yet. All I can say is you can walk for a very long time and get to where you're going, but all along, little bits of yourself are left along the way, and you get to where you are, and there is no going back without stepping on yourself, and there is no going forward without eventually tearing your entrails out of your body. The tizita is that impossibility. I am dead and buried. I am alive and well at the same time. When I sing, I know what that is, even though when I stop, I cannot explain it. And understanding with no words, only sound. So then the journalist now is trying to process this, this conversation. So Manfredi says, let me put it this way. Historians record history. And even though there are competing versions, it is there on paper. In science, each new discovery and invention is directly tied to the previous one, an archive that is also new. But human emotion, feeling, where is the archive? Philosophy and psychology explain, but where is the archive that we can visit to learn about what that first human being felt on first experiencing love or the tragedy of losing a loved one? That first parent to bury their child. We fall in love and it feels like it's for the first time. We assume the emotion of love does not contain the archive of past loves from generation to generation. All the way back to that living thing that first gruffly grunted, I see, I love. Sound, I think the corporal was trying to tell me, expresses that archive, a 200,000-year-old archive of extreme human emotions. So my recommendation to anybody who's listening really is actually to just, listen to some tizita, right? It's basically one song, right? It's almost like a sonnet. Then musicians can do different things within it. But it's basically one song that has been sung from, I don't know, from the Asmaris and so on and so in Ethiopia to contemporary times, right? And it's a song, to my mind, I've said this elsewhere, that if Africa could sing, right? If Africa could sing its tragedies, if it could sing its triumphs and the beauty and so on and so forth, if you could sing the 200,000 word archive, the 200,000 year, archive, what would it sound like? So to my mind, that's a tizita, but really just listen to it for yourself and, and see what you think. Yeah. So if there are any questions, I'll attend to them. All right, do you write while listening to music? If so, which songs have you listened to for this book? Yeah, so I spend a lot of time listening to the tizita, right? If you Google my name and tizita playlist, the songs I listen to will come up. I don't speak Amharic, right? But the beauty ultimately of spending, 3 or 4 years of just actively listening to the tizita was eventually I could hear what the music was saying right? And that's what actually the novel is. The novel is all about that, right? Ultimately, hearing the human voice as an instrument and what that instrument was saying. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time listening to Tizita music. I recommend listening to Bezawok, and of course Asra Aweke, and Mahamud, and there are many musicians. Yeah, the thing that I found that was interesting to me was that was the amount of I don't know to call it investment in the Tizita. So much so that you could be the most popular musician in Ethiopia, but if you can't sing a good Tizita, then you just don't do it, right? So you could be the most popular, and if you sing a bad Tizita, that could ruin your career. Then also stories about families, having fights, over who is the best Tizita musician. But more telling for me was when I was trying to. I have two friends, from Ethiopia, and at some point we met, and I was saying, okay, so can you break down what the Tizita is? Can you break down the lyrics? Here's this song. It was a Bezawok's Tizita. Can you break it down for me? Because I needed to know. And we didn't get, and we didn't get past the first two sentences or the first two lines of the song because they wouldn't agree. So it's a song that people have invested a lot of time in. Imagine trying to explain a song that's so vast, right? To my mind anyway, that's so vast. You can't just transcribe it, right? So you can't. Yeah. Anyway. Okay, you jump around in genre quite a bit. Did you have a favorite to write? Do you have a favorite to write between fiction, nonfiction, and poetry? Yeah. So, okay, yeah. No, I don't have a favorite between them, right? Because I use whatever I have. It's like having many tools, Okay, I guess you could say I'm bragging there, right? By saying that I have many tools that I can, that I can use. Yeah, so sometimes some things you can only express in poetry. Other things you can only express in fiction. In the past, I've said that if for things I really don't understand, like for things I can't comprehend politically, I go to poetry. Right, trying to understand it, the example I give is if you're trying to understand genocide, right? Of course you can understand it, politically, right? If you're thinking, let's say, about Rwanda, right? You can talk about, you can use Mahmoud Mamdani's when victims become killers, and understanding politically. But you're still left with the question of how is it possible that people who have lived who have been neighbors for years, for generations, how do they wake up one day and, pick up a machete or a gun, and go to the neighbor that they have known for years and kill them, right? So I think that's a question for poetry. For the Tizita, though, the novel is actually, you could argue, and this is a great question actually now, because now I'm thinking about it, I think for the Tizita novel, I had to bring everything. Like I really had to bring everything to the table. So you'll find poetry, you'll find fiction, you'll find the voice of the narrator is a journalistic voice, right? So you'll find, that sort of a journalistic, investigative journalistic voice. Yeah, so I would say, that it's a novel where I brought everything together. Do you play any instruments? Yeah, no, I play guitar. I play the guitar, but not very well though. I also play the flute, but not very well. And perhaps because of wanting, or the hunger, right, of the hunger of the sound. That helped me with the writing, right? If I was a musician, then I wouldn't have written the novel. I don't think I would have. Then I would just play the music. Yeah, I would say, if you want a good tizita, find an instrumental, okay, fine with voice. If you want a good tizita with just a cry, right? You know, so there's this Bezawok song where it's just her and Ketema, the other musician, and it's just a cry, right? You know, so just this like very basic foundation that then becomes this amazing sound. Yeah, but on the other hand, you know, I wish I could play bass. You know, I wish I could play the saxophone and so on and so forth. Okay, hi MUKOMA, I live in Ethiopia and listen to tizita a lot. Could you please? Yeah, so I mean, so perhaps after this, I'm gonna go outside and think about our session here, you know, and try to play a tizita, but I really can't. But I do love I do love playing and hearing the echoes of the tizita, right? Yeah, but yeah, I think the beauty is actually in listening, right? The beauty is actually in listening. For me, anyways, actually listening to a good tizita. Yes, yesterday there was a session. There was, of course, via Zoom, but where a tizita musician, or rather an Ethiopian musician, played a tizita just with the cry, you know, and it was just an amazing sound. This, if you're interested, you can follow up on. Look up at the African Center in London. They have the whole session there. Yeah, but it's the sound, though, the sound, and also the voice, you know, because the thing about the tizita is more. It's not about showing off, right? It's not about like going Jimi Hendrix on the cry, right? It's more about like containing this sound, containing this history, containing this beauty within very specific, okay, maybe not specific. So I've written the novel, I still have problems trying to explain what the tizita is, but containing this sound, right? That and then I suppose giving it as a gift, as a painful and also beautiful gift. Can you talk a bit about what the tizita means to your characters? Yeah, so for the characters, for them, they're going. The tizita allows them to heal, right? You know, so part of it is trauma, right? You know, nostalgia, you know, and so on and so forth. But because they're so good at the tizita, they become self-actualized, right? You know, so they're whole human beings, right? They're whole human beings who acknowledge the contradictions, the pain, the anguish, and the love and the beauty of human life, right? Of just surviving, really. So the tizita then is what they share, right? So ultimately, that's what they have in common. But they approach it differently, though. So Taliban Man, for example, you know, he's a classically trained musician who does sort of like a rap, you know, like a hip hop tizita, right? You know, and he approaches it that way. For the diva has two personalities, right? So the diva Kidane, or also Kidane, she's most true to herself and to her music when she does when she does a tizita, but then of course she has to make a living, right? You know, so she does also pop music and so on and so forth. For Miriam, the bartender in the novel, the tizita for her is remaining. She's at the end of her life, more or less, right? And she knows it, right? You know, so for her, it's how she continues on, right? You know, but but ultimately, no, for them, so for the, okay, I've never written characters that I actually envy, right? So this, like in all my other novels, the characters I'm like, hey, yeah, but these are characters that I actually envy because through the music, they have seen something, right? They have seen something and they're trying to tell us and so on and so forth, right? Yep. And the question is, do you have a favorite Tizita musician? No, I'll definitely say Bezawok. I mean, she's just amazing, right? Bezawok, of course, Asara Weke. Yeah, yep. But there are many. What I would suggest is going down the rabbit hole of the Tizita, right? Because Mandingo is another great Tizita musician. And when I was in Ethiopia in 2015 and ended up in this club where, oh yeah, this is a good story, so I'll tell it. Ended up in this club accidentally, but also accidentally, Mandingo happened to be there, right? So we're talking about like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And, he was invited on stage to sing at Tizita. So, so he did, right? But the amazing thing was that, like in Kenya, where I'm from, like people would have tried to slow dance or whatever, right? But everybody just sat down and listened. So you can imagine this club, there was rambunctious, think people are dancing. People just sat down and listened to his Tizita. Yeah, so I'll say Mandingo, Bezawok, and Asaraweke as amongst the top 3. What are you reading? Any recommendation for books that have comforted, sustained you recently? Oh, that's a tough one, like, because I teach literature, right? So I could tell you what I'm teaching. And perhaps ultimately the curse of of teaching and spending so much time, like writing and doing scholarly work is that, that what ordinarily would be pleasure, pleasurable reading becomes work. Yeah, but I'll recommend one book, Veronique Tajo's In the Company of Men. It just came out. No, sorry, in the Company of Trees. Anyway, just look up Veronique Tajo, In the Company of Men, because it's dealing, the book is about Ebola, right? But you couldn't have a more timely book for our times, right? Because it's also about environmental crisis and so on and so forth. Yeah, yesterday I was looking at some of the one of my favorite poets is called Bob Kaufman, a big poet, So I just already reading his book yesterday again. Yeah. If others come to mind, if other authors come to mind, I'll mention them. Do you see the Tizita becoming more popular in America? No, it should. It really should. Okay, so we have Malian blues, right? I think Malian blues are popular here in the US. Alifarka, Omo Sangare, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, African American blues. So it should, but not just here, though, but also in Kenya, in other African countries. I think so. Okay, unlike African American blues or Malian blues, right? We're talking about a single song here, right? That's interpreted in so many different ways, in so many different rich ways, right? That it should be listened to everywhere, right? So yes, hopefully, yeah. Yep. Yep. What other forms of music do you enjoy? Well, okay, so that's going to be a tough question to answer, but okay, so okay, definitely like Kikuyu music or Kenyan music, or Kiswahili music. but we also grew up listening to a lot of country music. So Kenny Rogers, a good Kenny Rogers song will, it's fun to listen to. But I would say the genres that I listen to on a daily basis would be, okay, the Tizita, Malian blues, African-American blues and jazz, right? There's something about music that has experienced, right? And maybe that's the whole point, right? Music that has experienced history and a long history of of oppression, but also triumph, right? A long time ago, I wrote a poem called "The Blues are an indictment of America," right? The blues indict America. Yeah, but in that poem, the whole idea was, yeah, like here you have this triumph of these blues, and I think sometimes these genres are misunderstood, right? So my thinking is, okay, so imagine you're living as a slave, right? And yet you compose a love song, right? At that point, it's no longer a love song. The person listening to might be like, oh, it's just another love song. But at that point, it's not a love song. It is more, it's a triumph. It's a triumph that to have that human spirit come out in that song. Are the lyrics the same in every Tizita, always in Amharic? Yeah, so no, I don't think so. I don't think so. Because there are many languages, right? There are so many languages in Ethiopia and also in Eritrea, right? And this is something I'm also learning, right? I'm also learning, and the character in the novel, the storyteller, Manfredi, he's very much well aware that he's approaching the Tizita as an outsider, right? So there are also things he doesn't know and cannot know, but he's willing to learn. Then also the origins of the Tizita, right? At some point, I was hanging out with a friend of mine, who played me a Christian Tizita, right? So yeah, so I would say there's so much depth to the Tizita, and I would assume it lives in different languages. Oh, Masiwa boy, sorry, I wasn't clear. I was asking if we could listen to some Tizita, a few minutes of it. Oh, well, I wouldn't mind playing my favorite Tizita, actually, so if Harvard Bookstore can organize or give me the power to share a screen.
Yeah, absolutely. Give me just a second. Why don't you go on to the next question while I set this up, and then we can get that going.
All right. There's our Tizita. Unlike Afro-American literary culture, where music especially, so I'm assuming that everybody is looking at the same questions I'm looking at, so I don't have to read them. All right, okay. Unlike African-American literary culture, where music, especially jazz, is represented in literature, we don't have a corresponding example in African literature that I'm aware of. Unbury is my first of such a text. Are there other examples of where music is a character like you have done here? Thank you for writing the book. No, thank you. Thank you. Well, I would say, no, I would think there are, though, right? Like I'm pretty sure the Ethiopian writers, who have, talked about the Tizita in their novels. And I would think that, and now I'm going to the catalog in my head, that, yeah, that there's a lot of African literature that also deals with music or deals with artists and so on and so forth. Yeah, so I would hope not. Let me put it this way. I would hope I'm not the first one to center the Tizita. I would hope I'm not the first one to center the Tizita in a novel. But there's also Ben Okri's, what is it called? The book is slipping my mind. Anyway, there's a Ben Okri book where it's all about painters, right? You know, where it's all about art. Okay, if the name comes back, I'll mention it. Yeah, but thank you though. Oh, favorite Kenny Rogers song. Favorite Kenny Rogers song. I would say, of course, Lucille. You know, Lucille. I mean, you can't have a better story than that, right? You know, Lucille. Okay, guys, if you don't know Lucille, look it up. Yeah. Yeah. So my guitar is missing. My guitar is missing a last string. Others are played, you know, but yeah, but I'm missing some strings. So yeah.
All right, MUKOMA, if you want to share maybe one of your favorite songs,
Yeah.
You are good to share your screen.
All right. All right, here we go. Okay, better work. All right, then. Back to Zoom, share screen. Yeah, so that's one. But if you want to see like, let's see if I can get this one. Yeah, so this would be like a hip hop-ish version of the Tizita to my mind. And I would have to say the character of Taliban Man is inspired, by these young guys, like taking the same song and doing different things with it. Yeah, so and you can go on and on. You have Mandingo's. Okay, so maybe I'm just gonna play like a little snippet. Oh yeah. Yeah, so and you can keep going down the rabbit hole, or if you will, of the Tizita. But since I'm looking at my playlist here, if you haven't listened to Zenzi Makeba, she's Makeba's granddaughter, right? It has the same spirit anyway. So I'm just gonna play a small snippet.
I would like to leave you with the lovely. She will come and sing a song that she learned from her grandmother, which is the song her grandmother learned from her great grandmother, and it's called Ingwe Mabala. Would you please help me welcome back on stage Miss Zenzi Lee.
Okay, I'm gonna skip a little bit, please.
Dedicate the song to my grandmother.
Right,
I think
yeah,
they call traditional healer.
Yeah, so and it's music, right? You know, but it's music that's doing something different, if you will, right? All right, so let's see. Thank you. This is from Marcy. Yeah, I completely agree that Tizita is addictive. Okay, could you tell us about the emotion that emerges within you when you're listening to or watching Tizita musicians? Oh, wow. No, I mean, no, it's a lot. I mean, you know, but I would say the main one is feeling connected, though, right? You know, because like we get older, right? We get older through tragedies, you know, but also a lot of beauty and so on and so forth, right? But I would say the main emotion I get from listening to a good Tizita is just feeling connected. And yeah. What made you decide to write a book about this music style? Oh yeah, so yeah. So what happened was, I think I told at the beginning how I listened to a Tizita, right? And so I think in another conversation, I was saying that that sometimes you hear music or you hear a poem or a book, you read a book and so on and so forth, but you also have to be ready to receive it, right? So the first time I had the Tizita, I couldn't find it, and I spent years looking for it, or that sound. And then when I was applying for a job here, I'm at Cornell University now, right? So when I was applying for a job here, you know, and we're talking about like 10 years later, right? In my estimation, I had a colleague, his name is Dagmari Waboshet, who had written an article or an essay on the relationship between the Tizita and James Baldwin, right? You know, so I read the essay, and then it struck me. This is the song. This is the sound that all these years I've been looking for, thinking about. Then, yeah, in a way, yeah. So in a way, Manfredi, the main character in the novel, actually reflects my own search for this song. Well, it's also fiction, though. But it does reflect that hunger of wanting to find this song and to understand it. Though in the end, you really cannot understand it, right? So it's a journey. Yeah, but I mean, it's like if you hear it well, let me put it this way: if you hear it well, then you'll want to know more. And then Tizita Instrumental by Mulato. Oh yeah, no, this is it's a great instrumental, it's a great Tizita. What I would say is just get into the journey of the Tizita, you know, and listen to it. And if you don't speak Amharic, or if you don't speak Amharic, and so on and so forth, and listen enough where the voice eventually becomes an instrument that's telling you something. That was my journey anyway. Yeah.
If there are any more questions, ask them now. Well, this has been a really fantastic talk, MUKOMA. I'm going to have to go on a deep dive for Spotify just to acquaint myself with this style of music. It's gorgeous. I love the pieces you showed us.
Yeah, no, it's amazing music. It's amazing music, and to have so many interpretations as well, right? You know, to have so many interpretations of the same song. It's I would say it's like a gift we have, and we should embrace it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I am excited that your book is kind of bringing it to the forefront and showing people how wonderful it is through these fantastic characters. Any final words before we wrap up, MUKOMA?
Yeah. I would say so. Okay, so I would say. Oh, I see. There's a new question.
Perfect.
But I would say that okay, okay, when you have a book that comes out, the fund is actually doing physical events, book signings and stuff like that, right now. So and at some point I was like, oh, my book is coming out during a pandemic. But then I started thinking, but what a better book to come out during the pandemic, though, right? And what a better way for it to come out, right? Because the Tizita is taking us to the essential of life itself, right? And that sort of connection of, a historical connection to all ourselves, from, from thousands of years ago. But what a better time to think about music, and what a better time to think about beauty, right? And beauty doesn't have to be. Beauty doesn't have to be like a facade, right? If you're talking about beauty during a pandemic, you're talking about something that's very, very essential, right? And something that will hold us together, and so on and so forth. Yeah, so that, yeah, I would say definitely get the book. I mean, it's, yeah. Am I working on a new book? Yeah, I am. Yeah, so I'm also working on a book on Africans and African Americans. The tentative title is Somewhere Between Black and African: A Biography of My Skin. And it's looking at the relationship between Africans and African Americans, via my own biography of, I was born here, right? I was born here, but I grew up in Kenya, then came back when I was 19. And yeah, and questions that I've been asking about Blackness.
Well, wonderful. So hopefully for the next book, we can have an in-person signing. But for now, thank you so much for doing this talk with us and giving us just really fantastic. I had such fun listening. And to thank you and everyone at home who is showing up tonight, showing up for our publishers, indie book selling, and our authors, and our incredible staff at Harvard Bookstore. Check the link in the chat if you would like to purchase a copy of Unbury Our Dead with Song. It's fantastic. You won't regret it. Please remember to shop indie, shop local. So thank you. From all of us at Harvard Bookstore, be well. Have a great rest of your night, everybody. MUKOMA, thank you again.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.